Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Haynes, and I am the director of Philadelphia Family Pride. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm so happy to welcome you all tonight to a session on what's at stake for LGBTQ plus families in the upcoming election. Joining us tonight, we have Representative Malcolm Kenyatta, who's a state representative here in Pennsylvania, representing a district in Philadelphia. We have Diego Sanchez, who is the Director of Advocacy for the PFLAG National, and Michael Galvan, who is a PFP board member, local political person, and a candidate for Philadelphia City Council. So that's just really the intro I wanted to start with. We are recording this, as people can see, so that folks who weren't able to join us tonight can hear from us later. But I want to jump right to Malcolm because I know he's so busy with Get Out the Vote weekend. And Malcolm, I'm sure you saw my email, but we'd love to hear from you about what's at stake in Pennsylvania, particularly with the governor's race and the state house races. And then Diego's going to talk more about the Senate and the US, the national picture stuff. So tell us what's at stake in Pennsylvania and what we can do about it. And also, hi.
So let me just start by saying thank you, Stephanie and PFP for all that you do. It means so much more than you know. The safe space, the resources that you provide, and what it's meant for families all across the Commonwealth, frankly, not just in Philadelphia and the greater Philadelphia region. But let me just say it this way, and I'll expand. But there's a lot at stake for LGBTQ folks. I think we need to be very clear, not just with Mastriano, though I will talk about him in some detail, but we have two candidates on the Republican side who are running at the top of the ticket. One of them, let me say it this way. Both of them are completely out of touch with what families need. And I will expand on this in a second, but there's this idea that the Republican Party is the party who cares about parents. But what's very clear is they only care about some parents. They only care about some kids. And they seem to care about most kids before they're born, and after that, kind of screw you, has really been the mantra and the behavior. And so we have two folks running who are completely out of touch with what families are dealing with on a daily basis and what some of these policy proposals would mean to families. One of them certainly from out of state, the other one who's, we'd send him out of state if somebody would take him. And I think both of them, my words, not PFP's, are out of their damn minds. I think they've made it clear. At the height of this campaign, you have Doug Mastriano, who's continued to reiterate that his number one priority is banning all abortion, even in cases of rape and incest. And it seems to be that his number one policy priority, he just held a hearing about it last week in Harrisburg, is to push through this so-called Parents' Bill of Rights, which is really about restricting the rights of parents who love their kids as they are, about restricting the rights of lesbian, bisexual, gay, trans, non-binary parents and guardians from being able to care for their kids. This is not Malcolm's words. There's a great body of research that I know Diego and others can talk about. What kids need are loving, caring adults who provide safe environments for them to grow and thrive and experience the world. And our education system should be about replacing an empty mind with an open mind, not about closing down people from having conversations about the holistic view of our history, the holistic view of our future, and about explaining to folks at age appropriate levels what they need to know about their classmates, about different family structures that might be different from their own. And this so-called Parents' Bill of Rights really would fly in the face of that. It would be what we call the Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. It would really be that on steroids. And that was, to Doug Mastriano's credit, what he said he wanted it to be. And so he's not really hiding this proposal or trying to tamp it down. He said he wants it to make the Don't Say Gay bill look like the beta version of what he wants to do here in Pennsylvania. What has that bill done in Florida? Not only has it stymied meet free speech that a lot of these folks claim to care about, but it has put our educators in a very difficult position where educators are not able to provide the lesson plannings in a variety of different subjects, not just English and history, but in math and in other subjects where even having up pictures in some instances of civil rights leaders, or even having the safe space signs available in classrooms, that could actually lead to termination, and to educators in a place like Florida being put on a special list to say that these are individuals that hurt kids. Just think about that. It's dangerous and awful. Doug Mastriano has made it clear that he wants that here in Pennsylvania. Additionally, he does not believe that same-sex, non-binary couples should be able to adopt or raise kids in the first place. And you've seen folks just like Carrie Lake, who is in Arizona, and I only mention her because she endorsed Doug Mastriano yesterday, is saying today about her Democratic opponent, because that opponent supports trans rights, that she is for the forced mutilation of children. This is what they're pushing out. And so what's at stake, Stephanie, is so much of the hard fought progress that PFP has been a huge part of making possible here. But we're also in a difficult position. I don't want to understate the challenges that we have, because we as people of conscience and as people of courage, we have a multifaceted job now. We have to not only be in the position of constantly educating people against the flood of misrepresentations and misinformation and disinformation that's being forced out on an ongoing basis, but then we have to talk to people about what we want to do in terms of how do we advance policy agendas that PFP and other groups hold to make it easier for parents and families, just when we look at the current status quo. Not even the nightmare scenarios that they're laying out. But we know that we still do not have in Pennsylvania protections for folks across the LGBTQ plus spectrum in things like housing accommodations and public accommodations and employment. Literally just had somebody who's involved in Delaware County politics, you know, pretty well known and involved, say that his lease was not continued because his landlord did not approve of him being gay. I mean, in the year of our Lord, 2022, this is happening still in Pennsylvania. And this is the status quo. And so what we have to do is not only to beat somebody who is as dangerous um, as Doug Mastriano, but we also have to continue the work that has been left on the table for decades now, including non-discrimination protections, including looking at how we protect families after that Supreme Court case, Philadelphia versus the Catholic diocese, and what that will mean in terms of chilling people's different agencies who want to adopt kids to loving same-sex, non-binary parents. We still have to look at what that litigation is going to mean. And thank you, Stephanie Fulton, the City of Philadelphia. Thank you. So those are things that have already existed as challenges, but now you throw on top of it a level of demagoguery and hatred and outright lies that puts us in a real tough position moving forward. And I'll say two more things, if that's okay. A part of what I've tried to do, and I know that PFP, was not engaged in partisan work, but I would just say I engage in partisan work. And one of the things that I've done is there's an organization I helped found called Agenda PAC, first of its kind in the nation, where we are actually going after what we call the beatable bigots, spending a lot of resources going after these folks. We've done multiple digital ads, text, other types of things to engage voters. We actually are doing ads on Grindr, by the way, to tell people about registering to vote. And we're going to be doing ads around get out the vote, because we have to go wherever people are to talk to them about what's at stake. And it's so grateful, that we have folks who have been involved, particularly in trying to elect LGBTQ candidates like Victory Fund and others, who are partnering with us in other races where we think there are beatable bigots who are running for Congress or for other seats. And so Agenda Pack, we just started in September, and already have spent, I think, $250,000, okay, just off the ground. We got together and said, we need to do this. And so you'll see a lot more about that. But I will tell you, even when I believe Doug Mastriano will be defeated, but even with his defeat, we are in a position right now in the legislature like we've never been in before, where the candidates who are running for office are more and more viscerally opposed, publicly opposed to our rights and to our basic freedoms in a way that we haven't seen before. I mean, you used to have Republicans, some of my current colleagues, who would at least pretend to care about our community, and then they would get to Harrisburg and do nothing about it. Stephanie, in your former life on the board of Liberty City, you know this very well. But now we have folks who are running for office on an explicit platform of supporting the types of policies that I just very briefly touched on as it relates to Doug Mastriano. But I am not, with all of these challenges in front of us, I have more hope than I've ever had. And I know that that sounds counterintuitive, but that hope is generated from the reality that people don't try to fight you when you're losing. People try to fight you when you're winning. And because of the work that we have done over generations, I go to schools all the time and speak to young people who were leaps and bounds beyond where I was in terms of their openness, their willingness to accept, their classmates, their family members who have different family compositions in ways that I could have never imagined as a kid in the closet growing up. Never envisioned that. And that's why you see them trying to stop kids from even knowing that queer people exist, because we know that when folks have queer people in their lives or queer people they work with, when they see non-binary folks running for office, as Michael is, and other things, it allows people to recognize that who they are is not something they should be ashamed of, that who they are, that they're perfect as they are, and they're in a position to make this world a much better place than it's ever been. And that scares a lot of bigots who are seeing the public opinion and other thing move sharply away from them. And so the politicians in the broader public, I don't believe are on the same page on these issues, but clearly we need to elect more politicians who are in line with where public opinion is. And we're going to continue to do that. And so I apologize for having to jump in and jump off. I'm in Erie, by the way, in full disclosure. I'm going to be in Elk County. And so I'm about to hit the road again to be in Elk County. Been in 34 counties, actually 35 today, be 36 tomorrow counties since I lost the Democratic primary. But my commitment was to make sure that we continued this work and that we were for people who care about all of us, because it is not freedom to say to half of our population that they don't count, and to say to our communities that you don't count, and to say to parents particularly, and this is my final thought, but I have to brag about Stephanie as me and my husband think about kids. And Stephanie, I don't say this just because we're on this call, but watching you, as I have for many years, be a parent, in the way that you love your kids, in the way that you work to help other new parents, it is really special. And your boys are so lucky to have you and your wife, and so lucky to have you in this community. It matters, and the work you're doing is not in vain. And frankly, on my watch and on all of our watches, we're not going to go backwards. So thank you so much.
Thanks. That's very kind. And I'm happy to hear that y'all are thinking about having kids, because I was wondering. So there.
Well, I'll be calling you offline about that.
Okay. Yeah.
Talk soon.
Yeah. All right.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. So maybe we can just have a little chat about what Malcolm, I know he was awesome that he was able to get on for the amount of time that he was. Do folks have comments or questions about the governor's race or statewide issues in Pennsylvania before we move on to the national? I think Diego and Michael could speak to those things, and maybe me a little bit. So. I mean, it's a pretty clear choice. I mean, there's not a lot of gray area here between our candidates on the issues that we care about. All right. Yeah. So why don't we go to Diego? Diego, do you want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you, and maybe, your bio and what you do now, and then kind of talk about the national landscape and the I mean, obviously what we're thinking about and Malcolm talked about is the Senate race in Pennsylvania.
Absolutely. And everyone's paying attention to it. My name's Diego Sanchez. My pronouns are he and L. I am the Director of Advocacy, Policy, and Partnerships for PFLAG National. We're the nation's oldest and largest organization that blends together LGBTQ plus people, their families, and their allies. And that's the three parts. We focus on support so that people can get actual support to learn how to love their kids if they don't have it quite right. And also education and advocacy. So we do a lot of school trainings and corporate trainings and everything else. And then, of course, the advocacy side is where we try to make policy changes. When we're looking at the landscape, it's important to remember a couple of things. That federally, every 2 years, we have to elect an entire federal House of Representatives. All 435 positions come around every 2 years. On the Senate side, where there are 100, we have a third every 2 years. So that, because they serve 6-year terms, you get a third of the Senate turns over every 2 years. Why those elections are so important is because on a federal level, we know that when we have locations, both local jurisdictions and states who are trying to harm our families, we need to make sure that we secure federal protections. And the way that that happens is not just on the legislative side, but senators are also who vote for judges. They sit and do a vote on whether people actually who are nominated actually become federal judges. So the positions are important even in the judiciary, which we don't always think about. On a federal front, we know we have a few bills. One that we're expect to come up after the election is the Respect for Marriage Act. And that is really important because, after the Dobbs decision, where Clarence Thomas, Justice Thomas, made a comment that essentially stated a desire to potentially challenge the existence of same-sex marriage legally. It meant that the legislature then had to put up a bill so that we could actually move it. Now, we believe that after the elections, we will have the 60 votes that we need. We haven't killed the filibuster, which is where the filibuster is where people delay voting if they don't want it to come up. So we have not gotten rid of that. So we will be looking at that. What the Respect for Marriage Act did, though, was push back the Equality Act, which addresses a lot of the things that Malcolm was talking about. We don't have, it's unfathomable to think that in 2022, some people cannot put a photograph of their partner or their spouse on their desk without retaliation. We need the protections. We have some protections through Title VII, but we need the Equality Act to make sure that we get everything from employment, housing, public accommodations, public education, credit, and, believe it or not, jury service. Who knew that LGBTQ people would not necessarily be able to serve or have a jury of their peers by restricted access to serving on a jury? Where the point is so important right now, though, is that so many local towns, and I know that's going to come up separately, but the type of censorship that's occurring both with public education and public libraries, school libraries and public libraries, where people are doing the don't say gay, don't say trans, don't say black, don't say brown, don't say anything that about civil rights. It goes against the whole point of people being able to learn about their own history and about the important history of our own country. Shielding people from reality is not the goal of public education. And so we're going to have to be fighting those things very strongly. And PFLAG is a 501c3. We're nonpartisan, and we're fighting every step of the way on these book bans, as well as pushing for fairness in our states, to make sure that federally we also get the Equality Act after we get Respect for Marriage Act. I do believe the Equality Act may not come up in this Congress. We're just going to run out of time, but it may come up on something to tag on to another bill that comes up. The clock is running short, as you know, and we've got a lot to get done.
And when you said they would take up the marriage bill, that would be after the election in the sort of lame duck time period. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
Absolutely, Stephanie. It'll be during this period of lame duck, which is the period after an election and before the new elected people are seated, are actually sworn in. Yep. So, and you know, Malcolm made a really important point. They don't hate you. They don't come after you when you're losing. The other important point, though, is that we have so many parents who love their children and actually stand up and fight. They speak at hearings, they speak at town halls, they approach legislators and tell them that the richness of their family story and why all of their children should be treated equally. And that when you're discriminating against LGBTQ people, you're also discriminating against their family members and loved ones, and it's not right. So the fact that there's so many more parents now, even than when I was 5 years old and told my parents I was born wrong, and then later being able to be the first openly transgender senior staffer on Capitol Hill when I worked for Congressman Barney Frank until he retired, you know, those things would not have been as possible back when I was growing up, but they're omnipresent today. And it just speaks to, you know, Malcolm's point also just about the strength of family and the courage of our parents.
Thank you for that. Do folks have questions for Diego? Comments? PFLAG does such great work. We're really happy to be sibling organizations with the PFLAG Philly chapter here. So we, I don't know if you know this, but we've been having some joint get-togethers, you know, fun stuff for kids where it's LGBT parents and our kids, some of whom are LGBT identified, and then straight parents and their LGBT kids, and all of us, you know, getting together in one, you know. That's
so important. It offers such rich exchange that people may not know what other people's experience are. The learning from each other is so important. And for PFLAG, we're very mindful about not hating on people. You know, we feel that everyone has to be able to come to us when they realize that they have a queer person in their family, because eventually they will.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's really great for, you know, those of us who came out maybe later than they would have otherwise, because they didn't have the language or the, you know, role models in the media to see queer and trans kids around queer and trans parents. And that's been really moving to see, quite honestly.
It really is. I mean, I think about, I was having a conversation with my best friend the other day and just saying, just remember that when we were kids, or when I was a kid, anything, even a young adult, not so young adult, anytime you wanted to see a gay movie or everybody, you know, people had to die. It's always sad. And there's so many positive actual role models now that that people can actually have hope about the future. And I share Malcolm's enthusiasm, because I think that the more visible people are when it's safe, and letting people who are not safe to come out, not to have to do it, not to be publicly disclosed, I think the more that we allow that, both parts of that, we're going to just do nothing but get stronger together.
I 100% agree. Yari has their hand up. Hi, Yari.
Hi, everyone. Trying to juggle a cat, and that's the tail of the cat. Good evening.
Hi.
I'm a little comic relief. I just really appreciate this conversation, and I think we're pausing for quick questions,
Yeah.
but so I'm Yari, pronouns they, them, theirs, located in New York City, hoping this coming year to adopt some older LGBTQ identifying kiddos from foster care. I'm just wondering, while I'm in that waiting prospective parent stage, are there any way folks like me that is waiting expected parents, maybe with a little extra free time, can help PFLAG's efforts, whether formal advocacy or more behind the scenes? Thank you.
Thank you for asking. Yes, we actually are one of the leaders of the coalition on the Every Child Deserves a Family Act federally. And that is for, it protects everyone. So it's great for single people who want to be parents that are often discriminated against, no matter whether they're LGBT or not. It also protects queer couples, and it also protects queer children. And there's so many kids, that it's all a numbers game. People try to get the easiest adoption done. So the queer kids are often moved down a list, and because they're going to be harder to place, so they'd rather place more. And it's so the things that you can do definitely are keep telling your story, reach out to our chapter, and work with Stephanie also just to make sure that we can help you in any of your advocacy. And just getting the stories out there about families who love is really what it's all about. PFLAG really leads with love, and that's where we go. The other thing, though, is also conversion therapy, which so many kids are exposed to, and that there's good action in different parts of Pennsylvania that I'm sure you'll hear about later. But we're feeling really good, feeling very good. There'll be a town hall later this month in Erie, actually, where Malcolm is today, that we're co-sponsoring with the Trevor Project. We'll let you know about it.
Great, thank you. Other questions or comments or musings? Okay, so why don't we go to Michael to hear a little bit about what's going on locally, with this election and into next spring. And then I also just help me remember, but because I got an email today from the ACLU about some hateful group of people who may be coming to Philly and a rally that's being put together. So I'm going to go look for that email and the details, and then I'll share that.
Thank you. So my name is Michael Galvan. I use they, them pronouns. I will be speaking as a candidate for Philadelphia City Council, although I do sit on the board of PFP. I wanted to start by talking about the really great things that are happening for the LGBTQ plus community in Philadelphia already. Starting first and foremost with LGBTQ youth in the school district of Philadelphia. Policy 252 was enacted, I believe sometime in 2016, to protect trans and gender nonconforming and LGBTQ plus youth and young adults in our school system, so that staff have to use chosen names and pronouns, respect gender identity, and keep that private in situations of confidentiality, eliminating gender segregated activities, allowing students to participate in gender neutral activities as well, and allowing students to use locker rooms and bathrooms that align to their gender identity. So that has been on the books since, like I said, 2016. One of the great things that has happened since then is City Council, with the lead of City Council member Helen Gim in 2019, passed legislation that not only expanded the understanding of 252, but it also applied it to all extracurricular activities that are city funded where young adults exist. So summer camps, out of school time activities, and other places for young adults in the city of Philadelphia. And that legislation actually just went into enactment this year. I remember my son goes to a summer camp in Mount Airy, and his buses changed from boy and girl segregation to older kids and little kids. And I thought that was very cool to see that shift just happen overnight. Additionally, in the city of Philadelphia, the city is one of the first to pass a fair practice ordinance that includes LGBTQ plus individuals to protect locally for issues of employment, housing, and places of public accommodation to ensure discrimination in those environments do not occur. Sexual orientation was covered in that in 1982, and gender identity was expanded to be covered in that in 2002. There's also an LGBTQ plus equality bill that was passed by now mayor, former city council member Jim Kenney in 2013, which I think was a huge update to the Philadelphia Code that protected our community. And so I think these are all wonderful things that I think we should celebrate and just take a moment to acknowledge as positives in our space, in our community as a whole. What I would like to say, though, about the importance of not just November's election, but the election coming up in May of 23 is that if we have, heaven forbid, a Doug Mastriano as governor, we will need a strong, robust protective system in the city of Philadelphia and our surrounding communities to ensure that our LGBTQ plus families, our young adults, our kids, and any individual in our community has necessary protections in place to ensure marriage rights are respected, parental rights are respected, and other adoption ordinances are upheld as a whole. And yes, thank you, Stephanie. CHOP's gender clinic is also huge and needs to be protected and respected as its private space as well. I want to say also that the importance of the May 23 election is huge for our community. The city of Philadelphia is the only major city of the top, I believe, 26 major cities in the United States to never have elected an openly LGBTQ member to its Philadelphia City Council. That is huge and historic, and there will be many candidates that announce that are in our community, and I think they all deserve our respect and support. You know, we have an opportunity here to, I think, have a robust conversation about the protections that are needed to ensure that our family members, our communities, and our children are safe and protected. And so some of the things that I would love to just continue to reiterate, Malcolm touched on this, and so did Diego, but the process of having statewide protections, not just local protections in employment and housing discrimination and other public accommodations. Diego also touched upon oh my goodness, why am I forgetting? Conversion therapy, which is unfortunately a detrimental process to our young adults that we serve. One of the things that we can innovate around this space locally at the local level is to ensure that we do not allow healthcare providers and health insurance to cover any sort of access to conversion therapy spaces. You know, I think at the state level, it would be great to get a statewide ban on the process, but locally we can actually work on that ordinance itself. I would love to see us as the next iteration of Philadelphia City Council and with the new mayor move forward in that regard. And then we can also just continue to take steps forward to ensure that our population, our community, and our families are secure and safe in our work. So yesterday I sat on a panel with our PFP board member, Becca, who is working very diligently on, you know, ensuring our community has access to adoption rights and legal protections for adoptions, for surrogacy, non-surrogate parents, and other forms of parenting processes. And then also, you know, as unfortunately with the Dobbs decision that was handed down earlier this year, we also have to take into consideration procedures in place for ensuring that our children have rights to inheritance and healthcare protections and all of these things that we know are tied up into marriage and marriage equality. And then the final thing that I will say is just a plug for PFP here in this space too, is that PFP is doing very diligent work partnering with the city to ensure that we have more robust spaces for LGBTQ foster parenting processes and ensuring that we recruit more LGBTQ foster parents in the city of Philadelphia. And that work cannot stop. We have, you know, an overrepresentation, I think, of foster youth. And Stephanie, you might know the numbers better than I do. That identify as LGBTQ.
Well, they don't track it, so we don't know.
Okay.
but overrepresented is right.
I'm thinking about data with young adults experiencing housing insecurity and homelessness.
Oh, right.
In my head right here. But we know that we need to create more safe spaces for our community, and I would love to continue to advocate for the work of PFP to ensure that we are not just recruiting and creating these communities, but building a network of support for our families as a whole. So I'm going to stop there.
Yeah, thank you so much for all that. And if folks have questions, feel free to unmute or put in the chat. I will just add to what Michael's saying. So folks, I think know this, and Michael was saying, and Malcolm said earlier that, you know, we're a nonprofit 501c3, which means we can't endorse candidates. We can't tell you who to vote. We can't tell you who to vote for, but we can educate you about the issues that are happening in an election and the stances various people have who are running for office. And so just on a point of education for next May, and folks may know this or may not know this if you don't follow it closely, our current mayor is coming to the end of his term limits, and so he will not be able to run for re-election, which means that we'll be having a new election for mayor. And in Philadelphia, given that we have such overwhelming Democratic, big D Democrat voters, whoever wins the primary is practically guaranteed to win in the general election. And so really next May is when we'll be deciding who our next mayor is. Now, because of that, a lot of the people who tend to run for mayor are current members of city council, but they can't actually run for mayor as sitting members of city council. So multiple people have resigned and will continue to resign as we get closer to the election, leaving open city council seats. In fact, in this election next Tuesday, there's a special election to put 2 people in because it would be over a year, like they wouldn't have enough people on city council, basically. So we're going to have a lot of people, including Michael, running for council at large and district seats for those folks who are resigning to run for mayor. Add on to that, it's going to be a big ballot. We elect judges in Philadelphia, and this coming year is every 4 years we elect judges, municipal court. One of actually a municipal court judges, a former PFP board member, Greg Yorgi-Gertie, just shout him out. And the Court of Common Pleas and all the court levels. And so there'll be lots of openings and tons of candidates for that. And so we'll, do our best in a 501c3 kind of way to educate folks about what the issues are and who the candidates are as we get closer, as a kind of a look ahead to May.
Stephanie, can I
Yeah.
add that real
Yeah,
quick?
please. And then Diego, it sounds like maybe wants to.
There's also a really important Supreme Court race going on in the state, which, one of the things that PFP is working on is supporting the education around these sorts of don't say gay bills in our public school spaces. And if those were to come up to a court decision, elections will matter in those spaces because we do have an elected judicial system in the state of Pennsylvania, which is unique and special and is interesting in itself. But just PFP has the ability to your point, Stephanie, to continue to put out information about the importance of the understanding of what these bills contain.
Yeah, go ahead, Diego. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to mention that we have a program called PFLAG Votes 2022. It's really important that everyone vote, obviously, but it's also important to know what's on your ballot. You just mentioned some really important things that are coming up, Michael, and that's really key for folks to know. If you go on the web, you go to pflag.org/vote, singular vote, you will see 4 little pockets. One is on voter registration, one is on education, one is on mobilization, and the last is protection. And I just wanted to mention that everyone should know that if you are in line, you are allowed to vote as long as you're in line while the polls are open. And just if it hits whatever, 7 p.m., 8 p.m., and you're still in line, don't leave the line. On our site, we also have, under the protection area, the FBI hotline and other organizations. And also, multilingual tools for people to be able to be language competent as they're getting protection.
Great, thank you for that. And I put the link in the chat, as well as the Every Child Deserves a Family Coalition, which we're also a part of, although a smaller part of, and the just the general PFLAG website. Other comments or questions from folks before we wrap up? Okay, well, I'll just remind folks that our next session starts at 8 in this same room, so you can go do something, take a bathroom break or get a snack, whatever you need to do, come back. And then at 8 o'clock, we're going to start with our family reunion panel. We have a couple of parents and some youth who are going to talk about, what groups like PFP and PFLAG and other supportive collage and other groups mean to them and their families, share some wisdom. And I know in our in-person conferences that we've had pre-COVID, the hearing from youth, basically youth with LGBT parents has always been one of the biggest highlights of our event. So hope folks stick around for that. And thank you again to Malcolm, who I had to leave earlier, to Diego, and to Michael for your time on a Friday night. Really appreciate you all.
Thank you for your time and your leadership, and for everyone coming aboard here to share some time together.
Great.
Thank you all for
Thank
having
you,
us.
Steph.
All right.